One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Resident Evil Requiem is who will be the main villain of the game, and considering how important this character will be to the main story of RE9, there's a high probability that we won't see the reveal of this villain until the game releases next year. Especially if the villain turns out to be someone from the past, which considering the theme of Requiem, yeah, that seems very likely. But with so many possibilities to choose from, today I wanted to focus on 7 characters that I think should be the main villain of Resident Evil Requiem. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, from returning fan favorites to villains who work so well behind the scenes that we have never seen their faces, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is 7 characters that should be the main villain of Resident Evil 9. Let's get it. Number 7, George Hamilton. Thanks to the reveal trailer of Resident Evil Requiem, it becomes apparent to us that for the first time in 20 years, Resident Evil Outbreak will be a vital part to the story. For one, Alyssa Ashcroft, a playable character in the Outbreak games, and her daughter, Grace, will both be key characters in Resident Evil 9. Also, we're revisiting Raccoon City, the setting for not only RE2 and RE3, but the Outbreak games as well. For that reason, it would be dumb of us to assume that the events of Outbreak would not play a key part in the main story of Resident Evil 9. So with that in mind, since the protagonist of this game is connected to Outbreak, it's also possible that the villain of the game is also connected to Outbreak as well. And while there are a few possibilities for which Outbreak character could be the villain of Resident Evil 9, like Al Lester for example, the one character that I'm most intrigued by from that game who I think could make a great villain is George Hamilton. Now I know what you guys are thinking, George Hamilton is actually a protagonist of Resident Evil Outbreak. Well, while that is true, and George does come off as a relatively nice guy, especially towards Cindy, he's also a head surgeon at the Raccoon City Hospital. And as we are also aware of, every hospital that has appeared in or around Raccoon City has been deeply connected to Umbrella and developing and testing the T-Virus prior to the events of Resident Evil Outbreak. And I get it, the game makes it to where George clearly has no involvement with Umbrella and he's clearly unaware of it prior to the outbreak, but Resident Evil has retconned things in the past before. And of all the characters to potentially turn evil somehow, he would be the frontrunner for me out of all the other protagonists of those games. Plus, I even have a story for why he's after Grace. Maybe his blood didn't bond well with the Daylight Cure that he helped develop in the Outbreak games. So he needs Alyssa to reverse some of the side effects. But when he accidentally kills Alyssa, his new target becomes her daughter, Grace, who also carries the same antibodies. Not bad, huh? Number 6, brand new character. One possibility that actually does make a lot of sense to be the main villain of Resident Evil 9 is the fact that it just might be a brand new character. Now, while this theory is easily the most likely scenario, it's also not the one that I think most fans would want. Mainly because the theme of Resident Evil 9 is Requiem, or better yet, the past coming back to haunt the main characters. With that in mind, a brand new villain might not fit the theme of the game like some returning characters would. However, there is one way that Capcom could make the brand new character work as a main villain of the game. For example, RE9 could have a villain that's directly connected to another villain of the series. Maybe Spencer had a son who eventually took over the connections, or there was another Wesker child that survived the experiments. I mean, I know we were told that only Alex and Albert survived, but to be fair, Spencer also told Albert that he was the only survivor back in Resident Evil 5, so I don't know if it's fair to go off of what we were told by other characters. Spoiler, characters lie in the Resident Evil universe. Regardless, there's a lot of ways a brand new character could still make sense for the theme of Resident Evil 9 and be a good villain for the next chapter in the Resident Evil franchise. It's just about finding a connection strong enough to make it a full circle moment for characters involved in this game. Number 5, Albert Wesker. I don't think there's a dead character in Resident Evil that fans want to see revived in some way more than Albert Wesker. And for good reason, Wesker is one of the best villains in all of gaming. Seriously, there's not many villains out there that are more iconic than the Albert Wesker. Plus, he's a character that's been involved in the series since the very start of the entire franchise. From the events of Resident Evil 0 to the original game to attacking the Redfield siblings in Code Veronica to hiring Ada Wong in Resident Evil 4 to eventually dying in Resident Evil 5. Yeah, Wesker has been all over the place until the fateful day where he was blown up by 2 rockets in the middle of a volcano. Yet despite the way he died being pretty straightforward, fans still continue to come up with theories as to how this dude is still alive and well. One theory suggests that the Wesker that was killed was a clone, while another theory suggests that the rockets missed him and he escaped during the explosion. Regardless, it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities that he somehow survived, and if he did, there's a lot of reasons why it would make sense for him to be the villain of RE9. For one, the mysterious man in the chair is clearly wearing a jacket inspired by Wesker's midnight jacket from Resident Evil 5. 2. Wesker is deeply connected to most events in the Resident Evil universe, so him being the villain of the game makes a lot of sense. However, there's also a few things that don't make sense for him to be the villain of RE9, which is why he doesn't make it higher on today's list. The biggest reason is the fact that I don't think Chris will be involved in this game at all. He clearly has his hands full right now with raising Rose and dealing with the BSAA. And in my opinion, if Chris isn't involved, there's no way that Wesker is involved. These two have one of the biggest rivals in all of gaming, and to not have Chris be there when Wesker is ultimately defeated once and for all wouldn't make a ton of sense for me. Number 4, Alex Wesker. While Albert Wesker is a little less likely thanks to him being obviously dead and the fact that Chris is probably not involved in the game at all, his sister, Alex Wesker, has a much better chance at being the villain of RE9. One reason that Alex makes a lot of sense for being the main villain of Resident Evil 9 is actually quite simple. She's literally the only previous villain of the franchise that is confirmed 100% to still be alive to some degree. Going back to the cliffhanger ending of Revelations 2, we learned that Alex Wesker successfully transferred her consciousness into poor Natalia Corda. For that reason, Alex has a new body to control, and since that insane reveal, we have yet to see the consequences of this revelation in the Resident Evil universe, pun intended. So yeah, we could go through the entire list of RE villains, and it won't take long for you to realize that Alex Wesker is the only one that we know for sure is still alive in the Resident Evil universe. With that being said, it's a little harder to figure out why she's involved in this game as the main villain. For one, there's clearly two male figures acting as villains in this game, the hooded man and the mysterious man in the chair. And the trailer clearly points to the man in the chair being the main villain potentially. So with that being said, it's highly unlikely that Alex Wesker will still be the main villain when we have both the man in the chair and the hooded figure involved in the story as well. Still, there's one thing that a friend of mine said in a video of theirs, that being Rapid Crafter by the way. I'll post that video that I'm referring to right here in the description. Anyway, he said, what if this man in the chair or this hooded figure is Daniel Fabron? Never heard of that name? Well, he's one of the masterminds of Resistance, the Resident Evil spin-off game. We don't really know much about Daniel except that he was completely devoted to Alex Wesker and he was kind of a do-everything type of employee of Wesker. So if Daniel is the hooded man, the man in the chair, or even both guys, then that would leave the door open for Alex Wesker to still be the main villain of the game while Daniel acts as the red herring of the game. We also keep seeing this mysterious female character in the hospital throughout the trailer, so maybe this is Alex Wesker in Natalia's body when she's older. Number 3, Brandon Bailey. Moving to the top 3 characters that I think should be the main villain of Resident Evil 9, we now take a look at probably the most mysterious character on this list, Brandon Bailey. Just like Daniel, Brandon Bailey is probably a name that most casual Resident Evil fans are not extremely familiar with. For those that have never heard of Brandon Bailey, he was a high-ranking researcher for Umbrella who mostly worked under James Marcus before being sent to Africa to collect and research the flower, Stairway to the Sun. Now that name you probably recognize, as it's the flower in Resident Evil 5 that's revealed to be the main ingredient to developing the progenitor virus, and essentially the core of every single virus in the Resident Evil universe. After the death of James Marcus, Brandon Bailey secretly researched the flower himself, as well as researching other things that would lead to him and his new company, The Connections, creating BOWs to sell on the black market. That's probably another name that you recognize, as The Connections is the organization responsible for creating Evelyn, the main villain of Resident Evil 7. As you can see, while not directly involved in most games, Brandon Bailey has secretly been connected to most of the events throughout the Resident Evil universe, and he's only second to Oswell E. Spencer in terms of who's connected to more incidents throughout the franchise. So, because of how involved he is behind the scenes with most games of the series, Brandon Bailey would honestly make for a great villain for a Resident Evil game with the title Requiem. Still, there's a couple of things that keep Brandon from claiming the number 1 or even number 2 spot. For one, with us revisiting Raccoon City in this game kind of being viewed as a full circle moment, a character like Brandon Bailey doesn't make as much sense as 2 other characters in my opinion. I mean, he's a character that's more connected to new Resident Evil thanks to his involvement with the Connections, and even though he was mentioned a few times in previous games, like Resident Evil 5, there wasn't a lot there for him to fully be fleshed out as a character. Even Spencer, someone that has only been on screen for about 2 minutes total throughout the entire franchise, has made himself known to most casual fans of the series thanks to his name being mentioned constantly throughout the franchise. From the name of the first mansion in the first game to letters from him to Mother Miranda and Village. Brandon Bailey, though, while mentioned in Resident Evil 5 briefly in a few files, didn't really start to make a name for himself until Resident Evil 7. Number 2, George Trevor. This is probably the weirdest choice on this list, and I'm probably crazy for giving him the number 2 spot, but hear me out before you say anything. I know George Trevor is a relatively small character. I also know that he appeared to die many years prior to the events of the first game, and I believe there's a file that actually hints towards he'll becoming the first Crimson Head in Resident Evil Remake. With that being said though, my George Trevor theory as the main villain of Resident Evil 9 comes from one key detail that we've been hearing about Requiem, Lisa Trevor. Currently, the biggest theory that most fans seem to agree on right now is that the stalker enemy that we've seen in the trailer and gameplay footage is actually Lisa Trevor. From the way that she looks, the way that she sounds, and even some of the things that she has on her, most theories point towards this hag being Lisa Trevor. So, if this is indeed Lisa Trevor and this mysterious man in the chair is the one that has been taking care of her and even feeding her for all of these years, then it's also possible that the villain is someone who is close to Lisa Trevor. Like, I don't know, her father maybe? George Trevor? Now look, I'm sure a lot of you that haven't watched my theory video on George Trevor are already hitting up the comment section. George Trevor died. Even if he didn't die, he would be like 100 years old right now. And to that I say, well, yeah, you're right. George Trevor wrote in a journal moments before his apparent death in 1967 about how he was trapped underground and that he was dying of starvation and thirst. He wrote in this journal until his last moments, or so he says. There was also no body when we went there, though it's true it could have been decomposed by then, or Umbrella may have picked it up at a later date. Still, considering that there was literally a tunnel that led to the basement of the Spencer mansion, the same mansion that he built, yeah, I would be shocked if he didn't know about it and didn't find a way to escape. As for why he left his wife and daughter behind, maybe he didn't know they were alive. Maybe someone close to him told him that Umbrella had them killed, and until after the events of the first Resident Evil game, he wasn't aware that Lisa Trevor was still alive and well. Anyway, to keep this video from being too much longer than it already is, he might have went back to the Spencer mansion many years later, stayed young because of some sort of infection he got while in the Spencer mansion, and then brought Lisa Trevor to Rhodes Hill to watch over her and feed her while he searched for Alyssa and Grace for their antibodies to cure Lisa Trevor and himself potentially of whatever viruses they were infected with. Crazy, right? Yeah, I know. But it would create that full circle moment that we're expecting with Resident Evil 9, now wouldn't it? Anyway, before we take a look at the number 1 entry on today's list, there's actually a few more characters that I came close to featuring on today's video, but I cut them due to time constraints. So here's a few rapid fire honorable mentions for you before we look at who claimed the number 1 spot.
Oh, what do we have here?
Nikolai, don't! The city needs that vaccine!
More than I do. I don't think the wisdom I've been trying to impart on you is getting through. Now I know you can't put a price on life. But I'm in this business to get paid.
I don't get many visitors around here. I hear the city's in quite a state right about now. Well, there is an old road through these woods that leads to the neighboring town. It's easy to get lost, I'm afraid. Let me show you the way. Let's hope no one gets hurt. It's not like there's a decent hospital around here after all.
The wheels of fate led you to a strange place today. Let us see if you will walk away or not. This really is not a very efficient way of ending your life. But orders are orders. Oui, that could be a key.
Number 1, Oswell E. Spencer. If we're talking about a character that could still be alive, has been around since the start of the franchise, and would make a lot of sense for a villain in a Resident Evil game that deals with facing your past, nobody makes more sense than Oswell E. Spencer. So, to address the elephant in the room, yes, I'm aware that Spencer has been dead since Resident Evil 5. Hell, Albert Wesker put a damn hole in his chest, so I totally get why people think it's unlikely that he's still alive and kicking. However, Resident Evil Village and its DLC, Shadows of Rose, created a way where Spencer could still be alive. Near the end of that game, we learned that Spencer and Mother Miranda were acquaintances, and that Spencer actually learned a lot from her. He was even aware of the Megamycete, and he was aware of what it could do. Then, in the Shadows of Rose DLC, we learn more about the Megamycete and how it has some sort of hive mind network that connects the consciousness of different people to the hive mind and allows them to live on in that network after death. This is how Mother Miranda, Evelyn, and even Ethan Winters were all involved in the Shadows of Rose DLC. We also learned that there's a way to revive someone's mind into a vessel as well. In fact, that's the entire motivation of Mother Miranda in Village as she's trying to revive her daughter Eva, whose consciousness is inside the Megamycete network. So, assuming Spencer is aware of this, which he is, and he's connected to the Megamycete in the same way that Miranda and Evelyn were, which is possible, then wouldn't it also be probable that Spencer could have had his consciousness inside of the Megamycete after Wesker killed him in Resident Evil 5? If so, then he could have been revived into a vessel by someone alive in the real world, like, I don't know, Alex Wesker? I know it seems crazy, but considering that Spencer is connected to every single event within the Resident Evil universe in some way, going all the way back to the Spencer Mansion in the first game, he honestly would be the perfect villain for a full circle moment in Resident Evil Requiem. You know, a game that's going to be all about facing the past and dealing with some sort of secret truth regarding the Raccoon City outbreak. Yeah, Spencer makes the most sense to be the villain, and I believe that for a long time before the first trailer was revealed. In fact, my first video on this theory goes all the way back to February of 2024, in which I said he should be the main villain of RE9. Well, almost 2 years later, and I still believe that, and the reveal of Resident Evil 9 just enhances my opinion on that theory. Just saying. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Should Spencer be the main villain of Resident Evil 9? Do you think it should be someone else? And if so, who do you think it should be? Let me know your thoughts down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.